that power plant, the weight of it forces the car manufacturer to build a car that's much, much heavier than it would otherwise need to be in order to carry that power plant safely. If you eliminate that, you can build a much lighter car, get much lighter and more efficient. In our country, it costs 6 cents a mile to drive an electric car, and about 45 cents to drive an internal combustion engine because of the huge subsidies that we give to gasoline in our country, which they don't give in Europe or Israel. Now, our project in Israel is completed in 3 years, and then we have a contract to do the same thing in Denmark. We just signed a contract to do the same thing in the UK. We have contracts with the state of Hawaii to do it there, and Toronto, the city of Toronto. We have 30 nations in contact negotiations with us, including Australia, right now. So this is something that is happening, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen because the market drivers are so compelling. I want to say this last thing, which is this. 2 brief last points. In 1929, just before the stock market crashed in October, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was at 385. 13 years later, in 1942, the Dow Jones was at 85. So Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program had kept millions of Americans fed and alive and provided millions of jobs, kept millions of farmers on their farms. But it had not been a vigorous enough stimulus package to actually stimulate full market recovery. Then in 1940, Roosevelt made an extraordinary speech to our country, one of the most important speeches in American history, and he said World War II was then on the horizon. Although Pearl Harbor had not been bombed yet, but he said, we're going to build 50,000 airplanes a year. His aides later acknowledged he had pulled that number out of thin air. The year before, we had constructed 2,800 aircraft in this country. He said, we're going to build 50,000 next year. He said, we're going to build 25,000 tanks, a ship a day, a battleship a month, an aircraft carrier every 4 months, and we're going to do it until the war is over and won. And people ridiculed him from the left and the right. Editorial pages across the country said, no industrial mobilization of that magnitude has ever happened in the history of mankind. It can't be done. But Roosevelt, after that speech, immediately went out to Detroit, and he said to the automakers, you're not building cars anymore. You're building tanks and aircraft and half-tracks and amphibious vehicles. And within 6 weeks, they had completely retooled their plants. Within 6 months, they were meeting his projections, and within 12 months, they had surpassed them. The following year, we built 96,000 aircraft in this country. And we had full employment. 140,000 women went to Detroit with Rosie the Riveter, where they had been blackballed before, and they found employment for the first time in history. 200,000 blacks went to Detroit, where they had been blackballed before, and it started the mass migration of blacks from the rural South into the urban cities. That program, and we had full employment. Kids, 18-year-old kids from Utah, from Salt Lake and Provo and Logan were piloting B-17 bombers and Mustang fighters. And we had, as I said, full employment, and that stimulated a market recovery in this country that then made us the wealthiest country in the world for the next 50 years, by far. Wealthiest country in the history of mankind. And a wealth, a status that is now only jeopardized by this, by the export of $750 billion of American wealth every year because of our addiction to oil, which has beggared a nation that, when I was a little boy, still owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. And you ask, how do we pay the $3 trillion that we need to build this, to build this infrastructure system? Most of it's going to come from private enterprise. But, what we need to pay, even if we paid the whole $3 trillion from federal money, you pay it back in 3 years from the savings that we're now sending over to the Gulf and to China to borrow the money to buy the oil. So it's an instant dividend. And, Roosevelt had a disadvantage that we don't have anymore. Roosevelt was building stranded assets, planes and bombs, detonators, half-tracks, tanks, tanks that were going to be sent over to Europe to be blown up. But we're going to build something today. Pylons that stretch copper wire from Kennecott, of course, across the country, and fiber optic cable down the rail tracks and down existing right-of-ways to build this national grid system. And wind turbines on every farm in the Midwest that wants them, and employ millions of Americans. Bolting photovoltaic for every southern-facing roof in America, and building big solar thermal plants, and operating in teams to go into every home that wants them in every neighborhood in our country, pressure testing the home, and then blowing in cellulose insulation to make us more efficient as a nation. And at the end of that, we built an infrastructure that provides us with free energy forever, which is the biggest tax break in the history of mankind. Because if we can eliminate energy bills by eliminating it, by saying free and saying they're reduced to 10 or 15 or 20% of what we're doing now, it's essentially free energy forever. And we do that, and all of a sudden we become the most competitive country in the world. A lot of people say, the opponents of this have said, well, we can't do this, we can't make ourselves more efficient because it's going to put us at a competitive disadvantage with the Chinese. Does that make sense to you? We make ourselves energy independent and increase our efficiency, and it's somehow going to make us less competitive with the Chinese. The opposite, of course, is true, and the Chinese know this. And one of the reasons they didn't sign the Copenhagen deal is because they knew it would paralyze our country. Well, a year and a half ago, the Chinese Comintern, 85 people who run that country, voted to spend $7 trillion over the next 5 years on green technology, green energy technology, which is bigger than their military budget. They're spending more on green tech, on solar and wind, than they are on their entire military budget. Our country's plans are to increase our wind energy deployment by 37% by 2020. The Chinese are increasing their wind energy deployment by 20,000%. They are building solar panels so fast in China that, and I know this energy space really well. There are over 100 companies now in our country producing solar panels, and they were right on track to be starting to make a profit. 80% of them will be out of business by the end of next year.